Hello and welcome to the series of video notes on my class, the US 2 class, and some of this will also cover the honors class. They'll be able to use these notes. This unit's the lead up to World War II. We talk about the events that got the United States into the war, World War II specifically. The key to remember is that this was all going on during the Great Depression, the rise of the dictators in Europe and in Asia, and the United States preparations for a war that they saw coming on the horizon. Remember the study stack flashcards for the vocab? The link is in Edmodo. When you open up the flashcards, upper right hand corner, if you're in the Edmodo app, upper right hand corner on a mobile device, click on the box with the arrow pointing upwards, choose open in Safari. The flashcards will work better in Safari than they will through the Edmodo app. Everything for World War II, from our point of view, goes back to the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, Germany was forced to sign it. Everything was blamed on them. They were given very draconian, very harsh penalties to pay for World War I, and they resented it after that. And that document gave Hitler an atmosphere that let him rise to power because he countered everything with, I can get us out of this, this is unfair. The German people believed the treaty was unfair, and they eventually voted Hitler in as a leader, and once he was elected legally, he seized complete power later. And this Treaty of Versailles, the atmosphere it caused in Germany, allowed him to rise to power. So, the U.S. foreign policy. Officially, our foreign policy was non-interventionism. We did not want to get involved in conflicts around the globe. World War I left a bad taste in our mouth. Americans died for a cause that many people felt was not a legitimate cause to go to war. So, from that standpoint, people wanted, after World War I, people wanted us to kind of go back into our shell, stay out of foreign affairs, with the exception of trade. We had to make money, and selling goods overseas was a good way of doing that. We just didn't want to get involved in the conflicts going on outside of the United States. Unofficially, especially as we get through the 30s, people realized that we couldn't isolate ourselves, and unofficially many people were watching world events, trying to prepare us for what they thought was the inevitable entrance of the United States into World War II. And people were trying to kind of say one thing, do another. The government was saying we're staying out of the war, we're not going to get involved. But while they were saying that, many people in the government were trying to prepare the United States for a day that we may have to fight Germany. So this was a dual concept. Saying one thing, doing another, so we could be prepared for the worst. Okay, with foreign aggressors, we focused mainly on the Japanese, the Italians, and Nazi Germany. The Japanese, their aggression in Asia, which included China, French Indochina, which eventually we call Vietnam, and Korea. And they had been in Korea for a very long time. They expanded in this area for natural resources, and they needed the natural resources to build their war materials. So they were expanding in those areas. Italy went into Africa and into Spain. Spain had a civil war going on. There were the fascists. Versus the Republican government, which many people considered communist, so we stayed out of it because we didn't want to support communists. The fascists with Francisco Franco ended up winning that civil war. And then we're picking up with the rise of Nazi Germany. You have the three main things we're focusing on: the rearming, which the Germans rebuilt their military, which was against the Treaty of Versailles. Started reclaiming land they had to give up from the Treaty of Versailles around their borders, and Then acts of aggression, taking the Sudetenland, moving into Austria, taking all of Czechoslovakia, where the Sudetenland is located, and eventually culminating with their attack on Poland, which we'll get into. So the three main aggressors, Japan, Italy, and Nazi Germany, they were on the rise through the 20s and 30s, and the world was reacting. The United States was split as to whether they should stay out of this argument or get involved. The isolationists and the interventionists were the two groups fighting to influence American foreign policy. Now, talking about the isolationists and interventionists, America's response to aggression, we passed the Stimson Doctrine, which stated boundary changes due to force or threat of force are not recognized. That deals with Japanese taking Manchuria, regions of China when they invaded China. You also have them taking Korea. The United States would not acknowledge those boundary changes, saying that's not part of Japan because it was taken by force or through threat of force. Same with Italy's attacks in North Africa, and also the German aggression in Europe. We followed up in 1940 with the Export Control Act, which is sometimes called the Moral Embargo, that stated we would not sell war materials to any countries that are fighting or acting aggressively. We would sell non-war materials, but only at pre-war levels. So if we were selling corn or furniture or something, some sort of non-war item to a country at war, we would still sell them because we're in a depression. We'll still sell them those goods, but not at a higher amount because of the war. We'd go to what they were buying before they started acting aggressively. Japan invaded Indochina in Asia, and we increased the number of goods on under the moral embargo, and we eventually cut them off from using the Panama Canal, which forced them to sail around either South America or Africa instead of going through the canal and cutting their travel times down. Now we talked about the Non-Aggression Pact in 1939 between the Soviet Union and Germany. Hitler and Stalin didn't like each other. The countries didn't like each other, but they signed a non-aggression pact. Hitler didn't want to fight a two-front war, and Stalin knew he wasn't ready to fight Hitler, so they agreed to not fight, and they also agreed to split Poland. September 1st, 1939, shortly thereafter, Germany invaded Poland, as did the Soviet Union. 2 days after that, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany. And the big issue was, with this, Germany gotten away with so much. That policy of appeasement, Neville Chamberlain and Edward Daladier let Hitler get away with so much. I'm not certain if he thought they would actually back up their treaty with Poland, but they did. And the spelling, phony, P-H-O-N-E-Y or P-H-O-N-Y, I've seen it spelled both ways. The phony war was this period from September 3rd until May 10th, where war was declared, but the major parties involved, France, Great Britain, and Germany, did not openly fight each other. There were some small battles, some small skirmishes, some naval battles, and Germany attacked some other nations, but did not go after Germany, or did not go after Great Britain or France. Then on May 10th, Germany attacks France in the Low Countries of the Netherlands and Belgium, and soon thereafter, within 3 weeks, Paris falls. We talked about the gains. You don't need to know all of these countries and the years, but basically Europe was overrun by Germany, Northern Africa by the Axis powers led by Italy with German help, and Japan was running rampant in Asia and in the Pacific. They were pretty much unchecked. And these are the maps that show this is 1941, after the invasion of Russia. We talked about in class how after after the Soviet Union invaded the other half of Poland, this area that I just scribbled over was still under Soviet control, give or take a few miles here and there. Germany controlled the rest of the area. Hold on a second here while I fiddle with this. Great Britain was at war. All the other countries were neutral. And Germany controlled, and the other Axis power of Italy controlled most of Europe, which left Great Britain hanging on by itself. In Asia, you have Japan taking over the area of Manchukuo. It used to be Manchuria. And we've talked about this map in class. If you have any questions, email me. America's neutrality. We talked about the neutral countries in Europe. We talked about the neutral countries in Europe. We talked about the U.S. Neutrality Acts were a series of one-year acts. They started strict, came back to be more one-sided by the Destroyers for Bases, the Lend-Lease Act, and the Atlantic Charter. Those are all in the flashcards. Study those. We've talked about them. They're in the notes on the wiki page. Okay, on this slide we talked about a couple things. Number one, 1933, the first U.S. aircraft carrier was launched. That plays into things coming down the pike in 1941. 1940, Charlie Chaplin filmed The Great Dictator, a parody of a dictator in a small European country. Kind of made fun of Hitler. In November of 1940, we had Roosevelt winning his third term, which was unprecedented, and Pittsburgh's importance with the war industry, manufacturing things for the war, the landing vehicles made in Neville Island by the Dravo Corporation, the coal mines, the steel mills in the area, supplied things for the materials for the war effort. This all leads up to, all these events lead up to Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, the event that pulls the United States into the war. And we will talk about that more in the next unit with the start of World War II. This wraps up the review for the run to World War II. I hope it's informational. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thanks. My email is listed here on this screen. Any questions? Zip me an email. Talk to you later. Bye.